I've been 25 years old. I've been living in Toronto my whole life. Um, I grew up in a predominantly African Canadian household, Jamaican more specifically. Um, for the most part, I want to say, like one thing interesting about me is that I haven't tried to let my surroundings be my all-encompassing personality. So I've always tried to seek like a I guess kind of like more out of myself, my situations, my friends, and things of that nature, and try and make sense of this walk of life in a manner.
All right, awesome. The other black gentleman in the group. Quick introduction. Tell us something cool about yourself.
Yes, this is Will. I've been on most other live streams so far on Stone Disclosure. Something interesting about myself. Well, occupation is I'm a mechanic, and one thing I'd like to do is start collecting die-cast car models.
All right, gentleman number 3.
Hey everyone, my name's Matt. I'm a teacher by day, freelance artist by the rest of the day and night. And I'm grateful that Trey's invited me on to this. I've been on a couple of his podcasts. This one particularly is a very interesting topic. And I'm here mostly to learn and understand the experience from everyone in this room and their perspective. And it's interesting that I've grown up in probably one of the most racially and ethnically diverse cities on this planet. So I have a very encompassing experience with everybody. So this just is really going to be a fascinating show to listen in on and perhaps even provide some input into. So thanks, Trey.
So first and foremost, I want to thank Will because Will actually brought this up, and this is why we're here talking about it today. And we want to answer the question: is victim mentality damaging to the Black community? If it is, how? And if it isn't, then we got to explain ourselves. So I'm going to leave the floor open for whoever wants to start and take lead on this. And yeah, and then we'll discuss it from there. So who wants to first say on this?
I can kick it off.
All right, sounds good.
All right, so is victim mentality hurting the Black community? Well, I think it's safe to say that the question isn't whether or not it's hurting the Black community, is to what extent. Because I think it definitely, yeah, it's you see it everywhere. If you're around, large groups of Black people, whether it's our age, Gen Z, Gen X, Boomer, like you kind of see it from young to old. It's just a thing that kind of permeates no matter where you go within the community. I have a list of things that that kind of came to mind when I was thinking of this topic. And one thing I've noticed is that, like, outside of our own community, I find that Black people tend to be like the face, or they're kind of like pushed to be the face of every like marginalized group. You know what I mean? Whether it's like LGBT, whether it's well, trans. I mean, trans is kind of their own group now, but things of that nature. Yeah. Even for feminists, what I mean? Like, it's like they have to, like a lot of feminist, groups. They tend to have a lot of Black women kind of leading that charge, right? So that's something I've noticed, and that just kind of furthers the whole idea of being a victim. Is you're putting yourself in a group. I mean, yeah, I mean we all belong to some. We all have an ethnicity at the end of the day, but it's like continually marginalize yourself, continually put yourself in boxes. It's like you're just kind of all it does is put limitations around your around your future goals and what you're here to do, basically what you're put on this earth to do, to accomplish.
No, some very, very good points that you raised there. That's actually interesting. I don't think a lot of people take that in when you look at a cause, like any of the causes that come out that are not necessarily racially driven. It almost like it falls into two sections, because then you have your LGBTQ and all the other letters that I don't remember, community, and then there's almost like another section for Black people in that community, and it's almost like they have their own struggle that's worse than the actual struggle. And then if you look at feminism, like you said, it's like the same thing. It's like we're fighting for women's rights, but then the Black women's rights are also like way more engaged upon. And what I start to wonder is that something that's done by design, or is that just like a fact of life? What do you guys think about that?
I'll have to go last on that. I got to think about that one.
Because I don't know. I look at it, and I've had a discussion recently with somebody about this, and they were saying that it almost seems like they use the Black community to promote whatever it is that they're passing. Whenever it starts to lose traction, that's when it becomes like, oh, well, Black people are now more affected. Homosexual and lesbian, like Black people are more marginalized than regular, like people who also fit that demographic. Black women are struggling more than like just women.
Yeah.
But then I look at it and I'm just kind of like, is it that they're struggling more, or is it just that they have two different struggles? Because at the same time, yes, they're still Black, we're still being marginalized, the community is still part of the system that's not really designed for it to flourish the way it should. And then on top of that, you compound everything else. Now, I pulled up a lot of stats with this stuff, and I've been doing a lot of research. As I said, this is the most research I've ever done for this topic. But before we get into that, Matt, you specifically, you are of a different demographic, but you grew up in the same environments. What kind of environment do you see? Like, how does it look for you?
You know, that's a really interesting question. When I was going to school, when I was enmeshed in an environment with lots of different groups together, Black, Asian, Indian, I never noticed a difference at all. And it was really interesting. And I found it very easy to get along with all these different groups of people. That might be attributed to my character personally, but like there was always kind of like every group when I was in a school environment kind of segregated off into their own like racial group. I found that kind of strange, but I never was a part of any particular group. So I'd always bounce between everybody. And I found it kind of interesting just to be able to learn from every group. I don't know why that happened. That always seems to happen. Everybody kind of after a certain age, like when you enter your teen years, everyone kind of like segregates themselves into their own like racial group. It's very bizarre, but that's what happens. But it was always I never saw that as a detracting factor from participating in or conversing with, or just being a part of anyone particularly. Oh, Trey, I think you left the room.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Okay, there you are. Sorry.
Right,
so I like it's interesting because I personally didn't notice any, we could use the term like disenfranchisement. Anyone considering themselves what's the term, downtrodden or disadvantaged. I didn't see that. And actually, I can say a lot of my teachers growing up were Black individuals. I had some of the greatest teachers, especially in high school. I had a Black gentleman who taught a lot of the shop classes. He was phenomenal. And one of my best English teachers of all time was a Black woman. And she was so proud of her achievements in life. She let us know. And I thought it was so inspiring. And her son actually attended the same school. And when you were in her class, you didn't see race. You didn't think of anything like that. She drove a Mercedes to school. I was like, she's an inspiration to me. And she, was kind to everybody. She treated everybody equally. Mm-hmm. So I think I lucked out in being in an environment where race was not actually a factor seen by anyone, really. So, and honestly, you couldn't survive if you were racist in this city. You wouldn't last, because it just doesn't serve a purpose here. It's highly disadvantageous for anybody.
No, I completely agree with that. It's funny because I don't see, and I'm just speaking for myself personally. Other people may have other accounts. I don't see racism the way people have described it to me when I was growing up. So I don't know if there's just a shift and we're just in a better place now. I feel like there's more disadvantage, and it's pretty much all I've seen, but like nothing you can actually quantify as I am being disadvantaged in any way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I start to notice a couple trends, and like I look at something like the job market. There's a lot of people who are like, yeah, as a person who is marginalized, it is harder for you to move up. There's some instances where I could see that. Some instances where I looked at it and said, everybody who's gone beyond this like ceiling here all kind of looks the same. But then at the same time, we're also allowed to be in the same playing field. It's not like they ever came to you and said, like, because you're black, you're never going to be in management. Because you're black, you're never going to do this. So how how do we quantify something like that? Is it just uh effort on our end? Are we missing something? Is there like there's a book that they never showed us? And then you start to see people getting into these markets, but it's not that much. So do you guys believe that there is some type of, well, we're just going to speak in the employment market. Do you guys think that there is some type of ceiling where they're kind of trying to keep people of that demographic out? Have you guys experienced anything like that yourselves?
I haven't seen it personally. Not in this city, not in the area in the GTA. I mean, if anything, it's been more opposite. I think I think they feel the need to fill quotas. I think more like quality of outcome. They're looking for we need to hire more black XYZ. You know what I mean? So I that hasn't been my experience at all. And even growing up, I never saw it that way either. Like there weren't enough black. I mean, I think it's also the type of things, like, yeah, you could make the argument, okay, there's not enough black lawyers or doctors, for example, but then it's like how many black kids or families are pushing for PhDs in their home. You know what I mean?
Depends on what you're exposed to, type of
Things
thing.
of that
Yeah.
nature. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it personally.
All right, D, welcome back. You're having a little bit of Wi-Fi, but it's good to have you back. Uh, the question I asked the guys is, have you witnessed any type of barriers in a way put in place for Black people when like kind of bridging that ceiling to move up in their careers?
In careers, I have to agree with Will. I haven't seen it personally. Like he said, like I feel like people are more so pushing an agenda to like kind of fill quotas in their respective industries and whatnot. I also feel like Black people in the more professional space are starting to become more they're starting to push themselves more towards those kinds of positions. Like I find that more people in those spaces are kind of calling the shots, and they're hiring more people that do look like them, type of thing. Or at least that's what I found. It's not even just with Black people, but just I found with like Asians, Filipinos, Indians, and things of that nature in different industries and doing different things. But I haven't seen anybody purposely kind of weigh somebody else down to kind of keep them in that position, or purposely kind of keep them out of the room, so to speak.
So leads me to now ask the question, why are we still using this as an excuse? Why is it that so many times like somebody doesn't get a promotion and we're just, a lot of people, I'm not gonna say everyone, but quickly jump to, oh, I didn't get it because I'm Black, or I didn't get they're racist, or I didn't get it because of X, Y, and Z. Is that an accountability issue for us, or?
Uh, it might. I think it's more so case to case. It definitely can be an accountability issue. But it's more so. It's more so. I think it is like not necessarily looking within, asking yourself the right questions, like instead of being like, oh, this so and so is racist, they're trying to keep me down, whatever, whatever. Instead, just like kind of like reframe the situation, kind of like ask yourself something different. What was that person kind of doing um, to kind of get where they are now, or what kind of a recognition that they're looking for? I just feel like the questions being asked in that process aren't the right questions primarily, and when they do ask themselves questions, it's more so it's definitely not looking into themselves and being like, where can I improve type of thing, you know?
Will, you look like you had something to say before we
Yeah, man. I think it's 100% an accountability issue. I mean, it's the trend that I've kind of picked up on over the years is like it seems that it's almost like Black people, like, you know, we almost like want to be equally as victimized as like our ancestors from generations ago. Whether you're talking about, like, I did some math the other day, and it's like the last person, you know, because, you know, of course, Black people like to bring up slavery and things of that nature, and so often, and even though it was so long ago, but like it can, at least in my family, the last person who would have been living in under that would have been like 6 generations ago.
Mm.
It was abolished in the British Empire in like 1834. So you know what I'm saying? Like that we're almost 200 years. So there you go. Like it's like we're it's it's like the you know, I guess you could say the woke Black folks. It's like they want to it's like if you're looking for something badly enough, like you'll find it. You know what I mean? That's what I've noticed with a lot of
True. That's
uh,
very true.
to victimize themselves. It's like they'll take a situation where there's no racism at all. You know, in fact, it could be like you know, like somebody who's white or any other race, and they could be giving you a compliment. They could be being empathetic, and then somehow you'll turn that into a situation where this person is being racist. This person's discriminating against me. This person's you know, pushing the microaggressions on me or something like that, right? Like it's like Black people. It's like they're always finding a way to turn something into a negative, into like a situation that's, oh, this person's against me. This person's got to be racist. You know, ridiculous.
Matt, do you have anything to add? Or
On this note, I really think it's case by case basis for each individual. In all the different like working environments I've been in, I've seen across the board. I mean, actually, most of the Black people I've worked alongside have been tremendous workers, and some have not risen in their positions because they just didn't care to seek out higher qualification. But again, that's a case by case basis. Whoever chooses to will climb. I remember when I was in animation school, one of the best artists was a Black guy. He was absolutely phenomenal, and he's risen to extraordinary heights in his career. So race to me just is never a factor. But I mean, obviously I can't speak on behalf of the so-called Black community because I'm not living that experience. But from what I've seen, it doesn't seem to be a factor weighing anyone down really. But again, that's what I've just witnessed. So
yeah, I feel, and this is just running a lot of the facts and figures that I've been doing. I feel when it comes to a lot of these debates on whether racism exists and how it affects the community, I feel like it affects certain parts of the community. Like if we look at a lot of the places that were established as ghettos, like it exists kind of in that realm. Like, but that's because that whole system really hasn't moved or progressed any further. Now, I used to live in Scarborough back in the day, moved out to Mississauga, saw a whole different world, and came back. And what I started to realize is as much as it started to develop in these neighborhoods, I started seeing a lot of the same people. And for me, I feel like we're coming to the end of kind of where the systematic design of how they put all this together, we're coming to the end of it, and we're starting to realize that yes, we do have disadvantages, or we did have disadvantages. I know a lot of our parents may have. And there's an understanding that we're going to have to do a little bit more work because, again, you're coming from a situation that wasn't built with a proper structure for you. So imagine you're building a house, and you're building a house, and another demographic's building a house, the Asian community is building a house. We're all building it. We're all starting from different levels. So we know we have more work to do. We know we're probably going to have to put a little bit more effort. So why do you guys feel like a lot of people may not be doing that? Because if we're walking around and we're still seeing that a lot of these neighborhoods exist the same way, and these people are in the same situations that they were in, though it's a little bit better, in my opinion, is it just a lack of initiative, or is there something else there? Is there something else that's kind of like maybe we're not witnessing the same way? I don't know if I'm making sense with this question.
Makes a lot of sense, actually. But I'll let
Yeah,
someone.
I feel you on that, Trey. Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Like, it's just, these so-called ghettos are put in place, and it's like it's a mentality at the end of the day, right? Like, it's up to the person whether or not they want to leave or stay. And fortunately, there's too many who want to stay. So I think that's all kind of comes down to accountability, like we were talking about earlier. So yeah.
Can't agree more. Literally, if you don't want to if you don't want to change your line of thinking, then it's not going to change what you're looking at. So, fortunately, everyone kind of allows themselves to kind of stick themselves into this smaller box when there's a whole larger thing to like picture to be looking at and appreciate, right? So
I'm starting to, I've also looked at it in another, because again, I've talked about this stuff to a lot of people. I think we do it to ourselves, if I'm being completely honest. I think us as Black people, it's almost easier for us to point the blame somewhere else because we know how much work is going to be required. And I remember a lot of people gave a lot of pushback on this and said, no, our school systems are marginalizing us, the government's trying to hold us back, the government's trying to do this, society and media are leading things in this direction. And I don't know, for me, I was just kind of like, I know a lot of people who I grew up with who are in amazing places in their life. And I gave the analogy of, again, if somebody came to you and said, hey, listen, like, there's this beach with 1,000,000 pebbles, and under one of these pebbles, there's blue paint. And if you find it, you get $1,000,000. I'm like, I'm pretty sure everybody would be on that beach trying to flip over all these fucking pebbles until they found it. So are we just comfortable? I think as the Black community, are we just comfortable and we don't want better, or we're just comfortable with being dreamers who don't want to achieve anything?
I think the latter, definitely the latter. Everyone's just comfortable kind of imagining like what could be a better situation instead of actually trying to find out what that better situation could be, trying to build bridges towards that better situation. But yeah, I just don't see a lot of people like getting up and doing anything about what they're upset about anymore, really.
So
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No worries. Yeah, I gotta concur with Darren. It's funny. I was the other day, me and Matt were having a conversation, and I mentioned to him that like, further to your point, Trey, like it is what it is. I mean, Black people, it's like in a general, obviously, there are exceptions to every rule, but it's like in general, and I think you, Trey, and Darren can speak to this. It's like people, we just don't quite have the work ethic that other races do. We just, it is what it is. I mean, obviously, like as I mentioned, there are a lot of hardworking Black people out there, but it's like, yeah, there's definitely a sense of
Entitlement.
comfortability and tendency to just put the blame on somebody else. You know, just not take accountability for
Yeah.
for well, I was gonna say actions, but your lack of action. Yeah.
Open question to the group. Why do you guys think that is? Why is it that we're not doing this?
The lack of action.
Mhm.
Oh wow. Honestly, I really think it's just like the monkey see, monkey do type of thing.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like you like I said, if you don't change what you're looking at, you're not the picture that you're looking at is not going to change either. So you see your friends doing something in said community, you're gonna be, oh, that's dope. Let me go do that. And then over weeks go by, months go by, years go by, behaviors start becoming permanent, right? Your friends who come from a certain group that you grew up with start becoming a little bit more permanent. So your line of thinking, what you're seeing doesn't change. You're not allowing yourself to kind of grow out of that headspace. So again, it all just comes down to a lack of action or inaction, rather.
Will, Matt, you guys have any? What's your opinion on that?
I think it may have something to do with that kind of shared paradigm. And the reason someone would cling to the paradigm is so that they're not ostracized from the tribe, because by doing so, it really casts you out into like the desert. And a lot of people, generally, it's quite scary to be in that particular place for any race. And I'd assume then in this case, being a Black individual would just make it like 5 times worse. So it seems that it is kind of like a safety net to stick to this particular unalienating paradigm that is debilitating unto itself, but it still provides like a place for that kind of just anybody that doesn't want to climb, which is the place for them to reside in. This applies to all races. I know a ton of white people. They never fucking went anywhere, and it's just sad. They fell into drugs and poverty, and I could name on if I had 10 hands, I could name them all. It's just bad. But I mean, it's systemic too. Something in society is perpetuating that paradigm, as I call it, and it does afflicts everybody in possibly equal measure. I really don't know, but I know it's there for sure.
Yeah. What's your take on this, Will?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess to further along the point, yeah, like as Matt was saying, it's you know, Black people, it's like we just tend to we tend to ostracize you know, ourselves for no good reason. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you know, it's like it's almost frowned upon, you know, if you're a young Black teenager and you have aspirations to, like, you know, like just, you know, just study hard, just do right, just do, you know, go to school on time, honor roll student, all do everything, you know, make your parents proud, all that. It's like it's almost like looked down upon. It's kind of it's just
Absolutely.
there's a lot of you know, backwards stuff, you know, backwards thinking, backwards mentality going on in the Black community, has been for decades. And that's, you know, but then, you know, the moment a guy wants to, you know, guy dress, you know, like he carries himself like maybe like in, let's say, like a thuggish manner, or like, you know, he's has a reputation for being like a bad boy, maybe he sells drugs, something like that, then it's almost like that dude's respected more than the other guy I was the other archetype I was referring to. So yeah, it's that issue really runs deep in amongst Black people, well, particularly youth. But I mean, yeah, I mean, and those youth eventually grow up, and then it's almost like they don't let go of that. It's kind of sad to see.
And just to further accentuate on that point, like it's almost as if like general intelligence and common sense is like isolated and just like not just not praised in our community. Like everyone's just so quick to kind of run and do the wrong thing and then kind of like praise their friend about it. Oh, I robbed this person. Oh, what'd you get? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's just kind of like it's a backwards way of thinking. And it's really sad.
Yeah, I think that the black community is evolving, but they're very far behind the curve.
Absolutely.
They don't really understand beyond a certain point. Because I'm sure all of us had our parents saying, go to school, get your education, and make something of yourself. And some of us take to it, some of us don't. It is what it is. But I also think that they do that for an image. They don't really do that for our overall benefit. Yes, they want us to do well, but what's the first thing that happens when you graduate? Your mom calls her friends, her aunts, everybody. Oh, he just got his degree in this.
Yeah.
And whether you use it or not, they don't care. I think it's just we haven't been there long enough. We haven't been there in that time frame, and the people that support us don't understand it. Now, I knew for myself, I was very big on a couple of things, but it honestly just came from me being bullied. I came here, I had an accent. I went to a predominantly white school where there was probably like 20 black students, and talking with a West Indian accent, people made fun of you. So my whole thing was like, I got to change that. That's something that like I'm looking at the people who are where I want to be, and they don't talk like that. They don't move that way. So you start acting differently. So the main thing I want to like, and I don't know your guys' perception on this, is there a fear for us to move forward? Is it because it's so uncharted and there's not enough of us up there that a lot of people who aren't in the best situations willing to kind of take that leap? Because there's a lot of people that I've talked to who said, I don't want to go to school. I'm not going to do well in school. I don't know what I want to do. I want to get out of here, but I don't have a plan. I've never come up with a plan. And they just accept that I'm going to live here and die in this place. And that's going to be it for me.
Um, I think that kind of I was listening to another podcast one like a year and a half ago, and someone said something really interesting about uh wanting one of us to kind of lead the charge type of thing, and everyone just kind of jumps on the bandwagon.
Absolutely.
Um, it's very true. Like it's a very true statement. And especially in regards to us, it's since like the whole police brutality thing, like the whole Black Lives Matter, they created that movement. Everyone kind of latched on, they jumped onto that. It was cool for a second until like we figured out, the people that are in charge aren't exactly the greatest people.
Hmm.
I feel like what the issue is that everyone's just kind of looking around at each other, trying to like, okay, you're gonna make the first move in the right direction. No, okay, you're gonna make the first move in the right. It's just kind of it's a big waiting game to kind of see who sparks the first spark type of thing and like leads the first march into the great unknown as you would say. But I don't think there's any fear of it. There's definitely not fear. Like who doesn't want to better themselves as an individual or as a people? It's just I don't think we know, as you said, like we're too new into it, so we don't know exactly how to go about it yet. There's no plan. Well, rather, there is no plan, but like no one's formed a blueprint that everyone can kind of follow.
Hmm.
So I want to add to Darren's point. Yeah, there's not enough leaders, true leaders in the Black community. That's number one. Number two, it really isn't a community. I mean,
No.
when you think of community, you think families, homes, uh, nuclear families. You know what I mean? You think father, mother, kids, dog, maybe God above the dad, depending on your religious beliefs. And it's like these homes are predominantly led by women.
Hmm.
The Black
Yeah.
community is it's a gynocracy. You know what I'm saying? Women are in charge. You know what I'm saying? And even if you look at like mainstream media and things of that nature, it's like black women, black women's success is like, pushed more than success of black men.
Mhm.
And you could say that about society in general. You could say women, they're trying to push for women to be successful in general, but I think it's especially noticeable in the black community. So, yeah.
So I remember doing a lot of watching a lot of videos with that kind of came from the concept from Farrakhan, and then I started segueing because you know how YouTube always kind of like connects certain things, and they were talking about the best way to control the community is to control the family dynamic. So I thought about that, did my research on that, and I start to really notice, and as much as I don't want to hinge on uh, the ideals of the government and everything like that, because that was in the past, we can't really use it as an excuse anymore. But I think what it did, it gave us an out and it gave us an excuse. And it actually did derive from fact. Back then, they had the era of moral reform. If you guys don't know what that is, that was like pretty much the start of welfare.
Yeah.
It was government mandated. It was financial assistance that came from like wealthy institutions, but was never really monitored at all. So what they were doing is the idea was to enact a government policy for mothers. They called it the mother's pension. And what that would do is it would help mothers take care of their kids, feed their families for households where a father was not present. And initially, even if they qualified, Black women were never given assistance. After a while, there was a lot of complaints and uproar. Then they started accepting Black mothers, but they legitimately had to be single. They couldn't date anybody. They couldn't be seen dating anybody. They couldn't have any man coming to the house or be cut off. And then they started changing how much they got. So when I say there, I believe there is still a systematic element where everything came from. A lot of those neighborhoods, the Black male, again, didn't really have access to education. So we started working jobs in factories. And they were good enough that we'd get a pension, we could feed our families, and all of that stuff. And then when they started reforming these neighborhoods, they shut down these factories. So now it's harder for men to actually like take care of their families. So if you're the woman, it gave you more benefit to now get this assistance than actually what your husband could provide, but it wasn't anything that was his fault. He couldn't do anything about it. And we carried this on and this idea on for a very long time. Where I have the problem with this personally, and especially when I always hear people say, like, oh, we don't have anything, they're trying to keep us at the bottom and all of this. I look at myself and I look at Will and I look at like Daron and I look at other people in my community who I'm like, how did they do it then? Because the only difference I see between us and you guys who are kind of still in that area is we made the decision that we're going to do it. And it was hard and we went through everything we got to do. So I wonder now, are we just clinging to this because we have the out? We have the opportunity to say that it's not us. We have the opportunity to say all of these things. Or are we still kind of dealing with the effects of the system that was put into place to actually segregate Black people and make communal living harder? That's the same face I had when I was reading it. I was like, can we? Can we not?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
So
Yeah.
are we as the Black community using the past government influence to control and segregate Black people as an excuse for our lack of success now? Or are we still feeling the after effects or the effects of that system?
I don't think the after effects are relevant now, especially given what's gone on with us socially in the last 8 or some odd years.
Mm.
Everything's a little bit more on full display. especially with the advent of social media and all these other things. Everything's a lot more accessible. Um, I can't attribute it to that. I can say for the former that it is true. Like it is definitely like I feel like still kind of a thing that we're you holding on to as an excuse, um, just for just so we can kind of mask our own inaction on certain things. But I don't think it's kind of the whole picture, if that makes sense.
I think it's both. I think it's a little bit of hanging on to the past, um, and then also, yeah, the after effects of it as well. But I would say it's less so like I'm not gonna disagree that there was a degree of control from the government, but I'd say it was more, like it's welfare is supposed to be government assistance at the end of the day. It's supposed to assist you, and then you're supposed to kind of, well, ideally, it's supposed to be like a stepping stone to where you can get out of the so-called ghetto, right? And so to me, I don't see that as control. I see that as they say it's assistance. I mean, it is. Well, obviously you're at the bottom, but it's to help you work your way up. So I actually don't even see it as control, to be honest.
Matt, you have anything to say? Anything to add?
Actually, I think an added weight. I was conversing with Will the other day about this and how I have always considered the public education system viciously exclusionary to everybody if you're not STEM inclined. And recently they've updated the whole system, making it, they call it STEAM now. They've added the art component into STEM. And STEM is engineering, math, science, and engineering. And now they've added the art component. And I'm like, oh, that would have been great for me 10 to 15 years ago when I was in high school. Right. And now it's like, because I feel like I missed out on that whole thing. And it made it hard for me because I just wasn't interested in those particular fields. I just wasn't like, I could do the work in them, but I wasn't inclined in that direction. So, and I do feel like I've kind of been pushed to the side in terms of like where education, the system was meant to take me, if anywhere. I've kind of had to forge my own path in that sense. It's been interesting. It hasn't been so easy for myself. I can say in terms of like trying to follow that pre-programmed, pre-planned route for everybody in North America, we could say. So it doesn't help that it is structured in such a way. Something I noticed that was odd. I'm just going to say this. I think might have some relevance, but when I was in university, I was at U of T, Toronto St. George campus. I could count on two hands in the 4 years that I was at university, the black people that were in my classes. I don't know why that was. And I was studying language and I had courses in like technical writing, and it was like soft science classes. It wasn't like mathematics or anything. And there were women, there were guys, but I just didn't see too many black individuals. I didn't see a lot of other races either. It was kind of a mix of, I mean, everybody across the board, but I noticed that particularly, and I always wondered why. So I don't know. It's just an observation, but yeah, the whole thing is just a weight on everybody if you don't just fit that niche perfectly, and that's just such a huge burden unto itself. So I mean,
All right, so got another question. We all kind of seem to be on the same page that like the community is not really hindered as much as it used to be. It's probably a lot more freeing now. It's a lot, we have more options. We're able to do different things. We're actually able to like progress. We actually invest in ourselves. So is it important then for us to educate the younger demographic coming up about all the past struggles that Black people went through? Because if they're not really seeing that world now, why put it into their heads? Why not just let them experience the world the way it is?
I think I would say yes. It's important for them to. It's important for anybody, regardless of race, to know their history. That's but I don't think it needs to be pushed on them the way it's pushed nowadays. Like there's no need for, there's no need for us to be raising professional victims. I'll just put it that way. Like
To be faithful.
yeah, it's it's important to know what's happened in the past, because that'll inform where we're going to go in the future. But at the same time, it's like, um, everything is relative. You know what I mean? Like, we're a lot far off from the '60s. You know what I mean, like when my dad came here in the '60s, right? And he told me stories. He told me all kind of type of stories about, like, uh, one guy came up to him when he was like what, 11 or 12, where he was crossing the street. As an older white guy said to him, something like, "Wild men and Englishmen don't mix," and then he's walked away, shit like that. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously you're not gonna hear comments like that more than likely, but it's important to know. Yeah, it's important to know the history, the backstory for sure. But it's 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 like I don't know. We're just on edge now. Like, black people, and at the end of the day, black people, most of us are on the left. It is what it is. Black people on the left, they're more on edge. They're just looking for the next thing to be outraged about. So.
No, I 100%. Just to piggyback off of Will said, there definitely should be like a teaching of like our histories and whatnot, but there should be no reason to be fearful about that era in time. Like it's just, there's no need for it. We're very much far past the point. Like we like all kids are very smart now. Everything is literally at their fingertips. If we want to learn, like delve more into it, then they just will on their own spare time. Like there's literally nothing stopping them from accessing anything that they want to learn about. Um, but the to be fearful and to raise future black kids to have that to be kind of watchful in those kinds of situations, it's not necessary anymore, and it just kind of feel like it kind of robs them of a lot of innocence in that way, and kind of would warp shape how they think as adults too, and how they perceive certain things, people, and situations. So I don't think there's really any need for it anymore.
Matt, anything to add?
I would agree with you guys. I think raising awareness and just through education and like really trying to enlighten the youth, because the real contender is the media. I've always had a serious issue with the media for a multitude of reasons, and this is another one that's yet stoking the flames of division, hatred. It creates this idea of scapegoating everything outside of yourself. If you're just disinclined to learn, it's horrible. It's vicious, and it's the real threat, in my opinion. I think it's a real serious threat, because everyone now has the media at their fingertips, 24 hours a day, and you can cherry pick top video content, articles, whatever you want, to fit whatever mood you're in, whatever attitude you've got, and it just absolutely is so damaging for everybody. It's lethal, and it definitely creates a lot of the tension unnecessarily so.
All right, so another question to jump into. Pretty sure we've all been told or has a friend who's very pro-black. Is being pro-black actually helpful to our community, or do we think that it kind of pushes that segregation a little bit more?
In what way?
Well, for me, a lot of the people I know who are pro-black, they're very big on. They almost take this mindset that because black people have suffered before, that we are supposed to have certain advantages in life now moving forward. One of the biggest things that came out of the pro-black movements are things like affirmative action, where employers will now employ people who are minorities, regardless of if they are the better of the two candidates versus somebody of Caucasian descent. Now, coming out of that pro-black movement, do you think that's actually helping us? Do we feel like putting us in these positions, which is great, and yes, I'm all for seeing more black people in better positions than we were before, But if we're also not equipped to it to the degree where we'd actually be functionable and useful in that field, and we'd actually thrive, is that a positive thing for us?
Yeah, I think affirmative action and that. I mean, I'd say I know I'm referring to the '60s again, but I mean at the time, like yeah, obviously you didn't see too many Black people being employed in certain positions, and even maybe in their area, like the percentage of Black people in the area, there weren't even that same percentage working. So I think once upon a time, yeah, affirmative action was needed, but we're, in my opinion, we're long past that point. Like we're, it should be the best person for the job. I'm a big believer in equality of opportunity. I want to be the best person for the job. I don't want to be a Black guy for the job. It just doesn't quite have the same ring to it. And to me, that's actually offensive. That's racist in my opinion. Equality of outcome. Like you hired me because just because I'm Black. Like what the hell? Like what about my skill set? What about my future prospects with this company? My like it's crazy. It's all based around race, and it's I don't know, the fact that not enough Black people are offended by this blows my mind actually.
I see the wheels spinning in Daron right now.
No, I agree. It's no, I agree with everything you're saying. Like yeah, it's he's right. With the fact that more people aren't outraged about it is actually crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Hard not to agree with that.
Yeah, it's just. But then I raise this question again. Would you feel any type of way if you applied for a job and the guy hiring you was Black, and he said, you know what, I'm going to take you because we need more Black people here? Would you accept the job?
Oh no, it sounds like that needs more context. Because what if it's like, what if it's like a Jamaican restaurant?
Keep it simple. We're applying for a job. We went in. You're doing the interview. They looked at your resume. You just finished the interview. He's thinking about it. You know what? We're going to hire you. We need more Black people here. Would you take the job?
I'm gonna have to ask him what he meant by what do you need more Black people for? Because
right. I have questions exactly. Yeah.
We don't have enough brothers working here, so I'm gonna hire you.
We don't have enough brothers working here. What do you need the brothers for specifically? Right. Hey, that's what I'm worried about.
Looking at it outside of any context, that is what was said to you. Are you accepting the job or no?
No, probably not. Probably not.
And this is the job you worked for. It's the job you went to school for. This is the landing pad that you wanted, where you're gonna get your pension, you're gonna get all that good stuff.
Probably I'll get another interview somewhere else. I ain't interested. Like, you know what I'm saying?
That was my first thought too. Yeah, it's not like it's the last, unless this is like the last company on earth that'll hire me for, I want to be hired to be the best employee.
Matt, what about yourself? Same situation.
That's interesting. That it tells me immediately what this employer's mentality is like. Obviously exclusionary, discriminant, possibly low-key racist, if not overtly racist. And I mean, that alone tells me like I could have qualms with this individual because if I don't align with their, if I don't align with that tells me so much right then and there. And yeah, like it would be kind of cringe, to be honest. Like, are you fucking racist? Like, come on, it's ridiculous. You're hiring, like, actually, I worked at a place when I was in high school, co-op in my final year. And I remember the boss telling me, like, he's like, oh, we had to hire this is really crazy. He's like, we had to hire girls and black guys, like black youth, because they told us to. And I'm like, I was thinking, what the fuck? Because I didn't see any girls around, but he's like, there was a time we had to hire them, and they didn't last because they didn't like being there. This is like a hardcore, hyper masculine work environment, machine shop, like everything. I learned how to do everything there, mechanical and technical. But there were still quite a few young black guys there that I was working alongside, and there was no issue there. And there was actually one black guy there that I considered easily the hardest worker I've ever seen. But he was just there. I guess he just enjoyed the work. But this guy, I could say like even that boss was it's kind of like, oh, like he's most guys there were white. So, and I kind of fit in there when I was in high school. It was a placement. But yeah, like I could tell like there was just this undertone of discrimination, and this guy's just being a prick. The boss was a prick. And that's basically what that kind of boss would be like, hiring someone based on their color. We'd be butting heads basically, and I would consider that as a reason not to work there.
I agree.
Like at my age now, no, I wouldn't go for that. I was like 16, 17 when I went there, but now at my age, I wouldn't last because I wouldn't put up with any shit from an employer like that.
I've been in an employment situation like that too. And they were like, yeah, we just hired to hire a bunch of young black people. I was like, you mean had to? Like you didn't want them?
I know it's yeah.
You know what I mean? Like don't hire them because you feel like you have to. All right, another scenario. You get this job now and you're walking through, and I'm just throwing scenarios out just to gauge everyone's mental perception on these situations. This is actually something I went through. So I got this job, and they were walking me through the building, and they're like, oh, there's the 3 black guys all around the water cooler. And he made a thing to point out that they had 3 black employees and they were all at the same time together. Are you walking out of this job or no?
Walking right the fuck out of that motherfucker.
Yeah. I'm out of there, man. That's kind of pushing the agenda on me.
Based on that one sentence alone, that tells me everything I need to know about where I'm about to work at. You know what I'm saying? Like that is crazy.
I cut so fast. I never went back.
That is fucking
I
crazy.
was unemployed for 3 months, but it was fine. I was okay with it. Oh, man. Okay, so we all seem to be on the same page with all the advancements in the black community. So to ask the question again, is victim mentality damaging this community? Now, we can see that from a systematic sense, it's not really as impactful as it used to be. Yes, there are still a large majority of black people living in lower income communities. It's facts. The education system for a lot of those schools is not going to be the best. If we're speaking in Canada, going to Galloway Public School is going to be a very different experience from going to like the school up on Rouge Hill, where there's a lot more of a wider demographic. The school actually looks newer, looks better, looks cleaner. So is it just psychological for us at this point? Are we just mentally in a place where we're able to, I guess, create this dynamic that doesn't really exist? And why do you guys think that is, if that's the case? Are black people just dealing with trauma at this point?
Well, I have one question to your last point there. Is it trauma?
That's a good question.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that there aren't instances where there isn't trauma in black community, but it's like I think for the most part we're not dealing with trauma. You know what I'm saying? To go back to what I said earlier, like everything's relative, man. Like I didn't go through the trauma my dad went through when he's in his early years in this country. You know what I mean? That coming from Jamaica, like yeah, it's and I actually have a relative who was one of the earlier immigrants from the Caribbean to come here. in Toronto. It was like she came here in like the 30s. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what she had to go through. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's yeah, I don't think us as millennials / Gen Z, like I don't think trauma is really the thing. But yeah, there we are definitely stuck in a minds in a mentality where it's like you know kind of like the whole crab in the bucket type scenario. Like, okay, I can't get out. Like one guy who got out, he's he's not reaching back down to help me out. Like, it's like, again, and that goes back to what I said about it not being community and there not being leaders, true leaders. So yeah, that situation.
No, I agree. And to kind of further add on to the point of so rather the question of is it trauma? I feel like kind of everyone kind of uses that word or throws it out when they kind of like are having like a bad time with something. Like no, I feel like no young person. Like I'm 25. Like I don't really know. I can't speak for a lot of people my age, obviously, but I can honestly tell you that a lot of people my age haven't really gone through a whole lot of traumatic situations, or you know, they just they're just bad times, right? And bad times just don't last for a lot of people. And but I feel like bad times and trauma don't exactly go hand in hand. And people just kind of throw it out there just to kind of like either kind of either relate to somebody else's situation or plight or just to kind of like get that sexy connotation of like, oh, I've been through just a really traumatic situation, comfort me, this, that, and the other, and just kind of use it as like a crutch going forward in whatever situation or whomever they kind of come across. So, no, I definitely think there's something to that for sure.
So to touch on what Will said, where he feels like there's a lack of Black leadership. Growing up, did you have any leaders that you kind of derived your mentality from?
Me personally,
But
my uncle was probably like the earliest like Black leader in my life. Like my immediate uncle, he's a gay man, probably the realest, probably the best man that I know I've ever known. He's definitely someone who like taught me how to like really be a Black man, what it means to be a Black man. Like, and he's also like, what I appreciate the most about him is that he doesn't compartmentalize my thoughts. Like I can kind of come to him like he's probably he I can easily say in like from the earliest point in my life that I can probably remember, he's been the only person where I've kind of been able to come to with free thought and be able to like kind of freely speak my mind. And for I'm sure Trey and Will, I'm sure you know this, like going to either one of our parents or anyone in our immediate families, that wasn't necessarily a reality that we can really have, right? So just to even have that person, that Black man in my life that I can just have those thoughts with, and I can just share those, um, should just share my shit with, like that just was everything to me, and I think that kind of changed the game for how I grew up into a man, and I just think that I just thought I'd share that. Sorry.
Will, you look like you had a thought.
Well, no, I had kind of the opposite experience. I didn't really have a male role model. You know what I mean? Like my father, like my parents split up when I was 10, separated. And so my father, one thing I do I do recall, and it resonated with me later on, like my father, like in the early years, he always had my back. Like I remember like there was a bully, like, and this was like grade 2 or something like that, and it was like bully. And we literally lived like down the street from the elementary school. Like we could walk there in like 6-7 minutes. And there was a guy who lived across the street. Like we lived in a little co-op, and this is off of Murison, actually. First place I moved to when I came to Scarborough.
Mm.
And there was a guy, it was like this Filipino kid who lived like across the street from our co-op in like a detached house. And this guy would just pick on me like for like, I don't know how long it lasted, but it had to be at least a couple of weeks.
Mm.
It was a little while. And my sister picked up on it, and she just kind of, I guess, she observed what was going on, and then she noticed where the guy lived and everything. And there was one day, like, yeah, I just, it was too much, and I would cry very easily as a kid. And my dad went to the guy to the the house, and like in front of the kid and everything, in front of his parents. So yeah, that's the kind of dad I had, like, in the early years. But after the separation, I mean, of my parents, there was definitely a void for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could say, yeah, my mom, quote unquote, became the father and the mother, and in a sense. And yeah, and then I never really had like a stepdad, like she remarried later on, but I mean, that guy, he really, her husband didn't really, he already had kids and everything, and I guess he didn't feel the need to, be a father. And I didn't take any offense to that or whatever, it is what it is. So,
Okay.
and I understand now, as I'm getting older, I understand now. So,
Mm.
a lot, definitely a lot more. But yeah, I definitely can't. I had a different experience in Darren for sure.
So when you say we need more leaders in the community, what does that look like? Are we talking about public figures? Are we just talking about people who are putting themselves in better positions? Like, what does that look like? If you were a person growing up 12, 13 years old, like, what are you looking to look up to?
It's a great question. I think we need a little bit of both. We need public figures. We need people like just role models in the community. You know what I mean? Who are doing positive things that will hold the attention of the youth. Because at the end of the day, the youth are going to gravitate to what holds their attention.
Mm.
I mean, unfortunately, like there's so much negative shit that's holding their attention. You know what I mean? Whether rappers who might be, influencing them to, might be a wrong influence to talk about their trapping and all this kind of stuff. And oh, okay, maybe I can sell a dime or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, like give them the wrong thoughts. And so yeah, so I think it starts at a quote unquote grassroots level. Like obviously there's the whole issue of fathers being in the home, but yeah, like Darren said, like an uncle, somebody in the family could definitely step up. There's definitely men in the family who could. It's just how many are willing to. That's another issue, right? So, and then of course, public figures, people who have a little more influence, right? That's another thing. Maybe not necessarily like politicians, maybe like business owner, that type of thing.
Mm.
Somebody that because it's funny, the black community there's always talk about entrepreneurship, and it's like we make such a big deal of it, but it's like a normal thing in every other race, like, so maybe a guy who's an actual entrepreneur could tell how it really is.
Mm.
So it's like the IG version of it that we're kind of spoon fed. I think that would be you know what I'm saying? I think that would be a plus.
Hey man, that's terrifying shit. I made 150K in 2 weeks. How? Well, buy my book. So you like
Right.
broke.
Exactly.
All right, Matt, yourself. What did you see leadership growing up?
With the Black community specifically?
With the Black and your community itself. So
leadership, actually, no, I didn't. And I share a similar experience with Will, not having a father figure for quite a while. When I was 6, actually, even earlier. And absolutely not. There were no leaders anywhere. Not on the TV, not that I was aware of. Not really in the public school setting. I could say I had some great teachers, that conveyed positive masculinity. But it's limited to the classroom, and obviously they're following the curriculum. They teaching you things you really need to know beyond that is, you're kind of hard pressed if you just don't have that figure in your life. So it's kind of been scarce in that regard for myself. But and actually, I could say, like, it's beyond race at that point. It's just a plight that a young male would experience, just being a young male without the figure. So that burden is universal, and I can see how it would just, like I mentioned prior, amplify the turbulence if you're a person of color trying to make it in this already, the society and the state it's in. So I do understand intimately that particular situation, and it, like Will pointed out, it's the demographics, nearly 50% at least, if not more, across the board. Like in North America, it's a fucking shit show with that situation. So I absolutely agree that we need more leadership. It's imperative, I think, at this point. I think that's actually a great point you touch on for something that could make amends in many ways for everybody, especially the individuals of the Black community.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's not a lot of representation. I will say that 110%. But I do want to make a quick point. So we are 4 different gentlemen, different demographics and age, different upbringings, different everything. All of us have kind of quoted that, like, we didn't really have that, like, positive role model of a father growing up. Yeah, we all came out better, came out of our environments, came out of our plights that we technically, systematically should have fallen into. So is there an actual leadership problem? Because if we're saying we didn't really have a lot of positive leadership going on, and that's something that's more needed, are we just anomalies to the community, or is there something more? Because that's the one thing that is not up for me. I personally feel like now there's a lot more leadership out there now. Now, I'm going to stay away from anybody in entertainment. I'm going to stay away from rappers, all of that stuff. Yes, some of them made themselves out of their situation. It is what it is. But I look at people like LeBron James. Yes, he's known for basketball, but the amount of things he's done outside of basketball have been astronomical for the community. So someone like him to look up to. Barack Obama, first Black president, which has never, ever happened before. Now, you could have your own, I have my little thing with him too, but you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's more representation. And the one thing I would always think was like, okay, well, maybe we just need more like parental representation. But here we are, 4 people who didn't really have that as much through the majority. I'm going to say the bulk. Or if we did, we didn't really like identify them as a role model in our lives. So I don't know. It just leads me to believe that there's something more there. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I believe there's like definitely a direct correlation between um who your parents are and the decisions you make um as a person, individual, and later on as an adult. Because um not to kind of use as like an extreme example, but racism is not a learned. You know what I'm saying? That's what, or rather, racism is a learned. It's a learned thought process, and that kind of starts from wherever you're kind of born into, right? So I feel like that kind of is a little bit conducive into into it. Like, for example, Trey could have an issue regarding something else, whereas I either have complete ignorance to it or I just don't know much about it. So I definitely do think like if there's definitely a decision, like an internal decision that you have to kind of make at some point along the line. Like it's definitely not like um cookie cutter copy paste type of situation.
So why do you think more people aren't making that decision. You know, we complain about where we're coming from, we complain about the upbringing, we complain about all these things, but no one wants to make that jump. No one wants to make that decision. How are we unhappy about something and we're not really do anything about it?
Accountability. Don't want to take accountability.
That's the only reason I kind of wanted to go into that realm of this might be psychological, because I'm comparing it to other things that I've observed and other things that I've touched on with other people. I've spoken to people who went through domestic violence, and one thing that I always would say, well, you had the option to leave. You had the option to pick up a phone, call the police, say, hey, my partner's abusing me. Cops would come, put the person away. But they stayed in those relationships for a while until, I don't know, something happened and then they changed their mind. And then if you look at statistics for people who went through domestic violence, they saw it growing up. Their mother went through it, their grandmother went through it, somebody else in their life who was somewhat of an influence on them went through it as well. I look at people who are like serial cheaters, guys who go out, they have like multiple girlfriends. You scale back a little bit, their uncle did it, their dad did it, their grandfather did it. So it becomes a learned thing. It becomes like I'm seeing a representation and I'm now emulating that. Now, when you go into therapy and you're discussing all these things and you're breaking these systems down, these become almost, I don't want to say traumatic situations, but they get categorized as traumatic situations and learned behaviors based on people kind of coping. A lot of people stay in places that they're comfortable with, and a lot of victims, they're comfortable being uncomfortable. They're comfortable being in that relationship where the person is abusive to them. And when they're not, they think something's wrong. Think about a time like, let's say you had a nagging parent. And so your mom comes in every day, and every day she's yelling at you to clean up your room. Every day she's complaining about something. The one day she does it, you're gonna think something's up. You're gonna think like, oh, well, she didn't come in today. Is she okay? Did something worse gonna happen? So when I compare kind of like the two mentalities, to me, they seem similar. To me, you're in a situation that you're obviously not okay with. You're in a situation that's damaging to you. You can recite all the ways it's harmed you, but it's almost like they don't leave because it's comfortable and they're cool with it. So that's kind of why I kind of wanted to lead in that realm of like, are we just conditioned for this at this point? Were we conditioned by our parents to think this way? Were we conditioned by the media to think this way? When you listen to like, and I'll jump onto like rap music. What's the one thing they always say in rap music? I'm trying to get out the hood. I'm selling dope so I can save up money, drop this album, go on world tours, and leave the hood. I want to get out. So even as much as they're bad influences, they're still sending the same message, but people aren't following them. Now, I don't know about you guys. I never sold drugs before. But if I'm listening to a drug dealer telling me I'm selling drugs to get out because I don't want to live here anymore, the message to me is get the fuck out. So I think it's just a thing where we just don't listen. Are Black people, do we just not want to listen to people? Are we just lazy? That's where I'm kind of struggling with this, because I feel like we may not have had the best representation and we may not have had the best leadership, but we've always had the same message. The same message was do better. The same message was, this is your situation, but you don't have to be here. Get out by hook or crook, whatever, but get out. And we're just not listening to it. I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on what I'm saying. Or...
Yeah, I think it's they, Black people, like, it's like we don't want to make the hard decisions in a general sense, and we just don't want to take accountability. I think, like, again, this is just talking generality here, but yeah, like it's easy to get comfortable, you know, and peer pressure, I think, is something that's like magnified in the Black community, man. It's like it's a killer, man. Like I mentioned before, like a guy who wants to is coming up, goes to school, uh, parents, he has good influences around him, to be on the straight and narrow, and then he can easily be misled, because that's not cool, right? Because it's yeah, it's kind of crazy, like it's also kind of like the paradox too of like that shit not being cool, and then you know these some of these youth coming up, they want to be, they aspire to be rappers and entertainers and things of that nature, and it's like, you know they it's like we, like the whole idea of the hood is all we have is like basketball or rap or something like that. There's only a couple lanes that the youth feel they can truly go down. And it's funny, I talked about how when my mom remarried, and the husband didn't want to really be a stepfather to me. But one time he gave me like advice, because I was kind of lost trying to figure out what I was trying to do in college years. I was struggling in math, and he mentioned to me, like, he straight up just said, "Hey, look, a lot of people, like, math just isn't our thing. Like the Chinese, the other races, yeah, math is their thing, but it's just not your thing. So just don't take math." So yeah, man, it's some things I think are just kind of innate, within Black people. I think there's some truth to that, but there are also times where we just don't want to do we don't want to do the heavy lifting, unfortunately.
Do you have anything to say on that?
No, he hit it on the head. Like the heavy lifting thing, especially. Like like he said, it's sometimes better to just buckle up and sit through a bad ride and try and jump off of it right in the middle of it. So yeah, it's definitely 100% an accountability thing, and not recognizing when to kind of jump off the ride.
Matt?
Yeah, I was going to say, back to when you said how the four of us had managed to get past all the burdens, the weights around us. I think it's a pretty good indicator of nature versus nurture. Where there was a lack of nurture, nature took over and gave us, we were gifted with that advantage just naturally, possibly. And I also want to touch on, you'd mentioned the rap music. It's funny you mentioned that, or coincidental, because as I was doing a little research prior to this show, I'd come across on my Twitter feed. It was weird. This segment with a producer, a Black fellow, who had mentioned that he was in the States too. Yeah, whether this is true or not, it could be conspiratorial, but he was saying that he was deliberately contacted by investors who were investing in the prison system. Now, this is crazy. Investing in the prison system and coming to him and telling him the kinds of music to produce to create the clientele they need to be in the prison systems to generate the money through the forced labor. I'm like, this is out of control. And it makes a lot of sense. And this actually parallels what you were saying about how they're pushing this dream of getting out of the ghetto by selling the drugs. It's kind of like, I mean, that's poisonous unto itself. It's saying that you've got to do this, you got to be a criminal to get out. There's no other way out. And at the same time, if the dream is to get out, it can almost become like a mountain that seems impossible to climb. Like it's a dream in a fairy tale. Like getting out is just not feasible or accomplishable. So like the whole thing with music is massive. And I mean, who doesn't listen to music? Who isn't influenced by music to some capacity? I'm sure the music that I listen to, I wasn't listening to too much rap. It was in my playlist, but not to the degree other friends had. But even the music I was listening to, I'm sure it impacted my mood, my thoughts, my decision making. It all has an effect. And we don't really know what goes on behind the scenes with these music producers and what their intent is in releasing this upon the youth, because it is like fucking magic, and it has a deep impact, deep effect that is often overlooked, dismissed, disregarded, and we're seeing the ramifications, and it's brought us here asking these questions. So again, I say the media is vastly responsible for much of what's been going on. Not completely, but it's definitely wedged itself in a very deleterious way. So,
no, those are some great points.
Sorry, one last thing. I was thinking too. Think of this concept. I heard this analogy a while ago. An acorn tree drops 1,000 acorns. How many trees are actually going to grow from those acorns? This is a case where we see this. It just the world is so populated, so busy, and in certain cities like Toronto, it's just massively. It's crowded. It's a crowded city. It's not built for this many people. So we see a lot of it's stressful. It's chaotic. Everybody's so close together and fighting for these jobs, and all of these things just shouldn't happen. Fighting for jobs, it makes no sense. There's so many things to do. We invent jobs. Entrepreneurs invent jobs. We need more entrepreneurs to do exactly that, to quell that situation. But it is the case that not everybody's going to rise, and we think that everybody should. It's just it's just not going to be the case with everybody. You can't bring everybody up across the board. I don't know. It's important to try though. It's important to try for sure. But
fittest, only the fittest can actually survive.
Mm-hmm.
The truth. So I don't want to ask this question, but I'm going to ask this question. Do you believe that the Black community respects itself? I look at every other community. I look at the Asian demographic, and their goal is to make that demographic stronger. If you go to a Asian supermarket, who works there? All Asian people. If you go to most Asian restaurants, who works there? All Asian people. There's just a collective love for each other. There's a collective of if I'm from China and I see another Chinese man, I'm immediately helping him. I'm immediately going to be like, hey, I got you. Don't worry about it. I see people who are from Colombia, and they're bringing down family members and helping them go to school here and helping them emigrate properly. I see a lot of Indian communities where they come down, a whole family of them, 10, 12, 14 of them, and they all work together to bolster their community. But from my opinion, I feel like most of the Black community is out for self. I don't really see a lot of places where it's a Black-owned business and it's only Black people working there. I think a lot of the times too, I see a lot of Black people actually talk shit about Black.
So for the Black-owned businesses thing, I've never actually I've bought from one, but I've never actually stepped foot in one. If that makes sense.
Mm.
So I've never actually taken in what kind of people work inside, but more so to that effect. You're absolutely right. In Asian supermarket, you're only gonna see Asian people. In all you can eat sushi buffet, you're only gonna see Asian people, right? So, but I definitely don't think there's a direct correlation to that specifically. But there is when I feel like, in my opinion, we are kind of the only demographic that does tear down our own people, as opposed to everyone else kind of lifts each other up, helps each other out, and other things to that effect. But you're right. There definitely isn't a lot of building going on. There's a lot more division, dissension among us as opposed to everybody else, and I'm not even sure if there's any one right way to fix that.
I don't necessarily see it that way. I mean, there is, I can say that a lot of Black owned businesses that I've seen in recent years, there's, you start seeing more people of different ethnicities, Asian, white, behind the counter, things of that nature. Yeah. So I get what you're saying from that standpoint. But if I think back to, say, the 90s, when I was young, it's like black businesses, like there were only black people there, If anything, it speaks to I think progress that black entrepreneurs have made. You know what I mean? Like in terms of furthering their product, and that's why you can go to a place like Scotty Bonds, and then nobody there would be black. And yeah, it's Caribbean. It's Caribbean style, like what, bistro, like friggin' sandwiches and like
Selling
bowls.
beef patties and no black people.
Yeah, for
Chris Jerk, you know what I mean? Like there's these big places, and Chris Jerk. Oh, I haven't been in a while, but man, that food was good.
Yeah,
they were like a style place. They had like a shawarma with like a jerk shawarma, a jerk poutine. I'm like, what? You could do that? Like, so that obviously you start kind of sampling these different cultures, and all of a sudden, you need people, their eyes perk up. Somebody who's white, Chinese, whatever, and then your clientele. Eventually, it's like you start to hire your clientele. You know what I mean? So the ethnicity of your clientele. So yeah, I think it's a sign of progress, if nothing else. But to your point about us not respecting ourselves, we don't. And the first thing you can point to is black on black crime. It is what it is, man. Like you're not respecting yourselves if your brother is shooting another brother. It's like, what, or even selling drugs, to a black man to another black man. It's like that's not respect. So yeah,
I hear that.
Yeah, I feel like we destroy our own communities, and I think that's scary because I don't really see that anywhere else. And I try to figure out or think about why it's even possible. I think that, and to go back to there was actually mandates of this, especially in the U.S., where they came up with an actual plan to control the black community, and the first step was to destroy the black family. Now, I've heard very mixed reviews on this, just talking to a lot of different people. There's one group that says no, like black families are stronger than ever. Black families are there's no drop off. And then there's the other demographic where you see the rate of single parent black homes. I don't know about you guys. Where I grew up, there was a lot of single broken families. There were very few nuclear families. I probably knew 4. And they didn't even like live in the neighborhood. Like 2 of them lived in the hood and 2 were like right on the outside. And then I look at a lot of media, a lot of things that go on. I have conversations with people. And it seems like there's dissension between black men and black women. I don't really see that anywhere else. I don't see that in any other culture. I don't think I've ever heard, maybe on a handful of women saying, oh, well, white guys aren't shit. I've never heard an Asian woman say like, oh, I don't date Asian men. Like, it's very rare. And at that point, it's a preference. They'll say, I just don't date them. But we actually like demonize each other. Why is that, in your opinion, different? Why are we so different than every other community out there? Why are we the only ones that seem to be doing this to the rate that we are?
Lack of trust. There's a lack of trust, I believe, between both the black man and the black woman. And as a younger guy, I don't know where I can begin to tell you where it came from, because I probably don't even know where it did, but but I also kind of feel like that's also attributed to where humans are kind of at with their dating processes now, and kind of what we kind of deem as valuable to the opposite sex, and what we value about them, and and in my personal opinion, none of it makes sense. So it's kind of like this big ass this big chicken game of trying to find like trying to find the happy medium between both genders. But I believe that there's just just a severe lack of trust and respect between the two. And but I can't begin to tell you where it stems from though.
Well, the lack of trust, yeah, I agree with Darren there, but it's I think it's more than that though. It's also there's so much we wrap up so much identity in being black, more so than white people do being white, Asians being Asian, because it's like, and also other races, they I think they put more to nationalities than they do race. You know, like they identify themselves or categorize themselves more that way. You know what I mean? Like because when you say black, it's like, okay, we're talking about all of us. We're talking about Jamaicans, Trinis. We're talking about Africans. We're talking about African Americans. Like it's a very all encompassing thing. So it's so there's a lot of identity wrapped up in that, and I don't know if it's hard to say if we're putting too much identity on that. Like that, there's a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of power that can come from that. Like power, and self-respect that can come from saying, "Hey, I'm a black man." And but I don't. And yeah, it's like I think the same things that go on, Trey, that you were saying. With the you don't hear like white people saying, "I hate white men," and women saying, "I hate," the men saying, "I hate white women." Like they might not vocalize as much, but I think that hate is equally out there though. That's one thing I've noticed, and I do also notice there's a lot of woke white women who are out there saying, I hate white men, or they're saying I've seen some clips out there, surfacing of some women saying disparaging men of their own race. So it's yeah, it's definitely out there. Just they don't vocalize it as much, but I think that sentiment is definitely out there in other races and ethnicities.
Do you think it's as rampant though as the black community?
Absolutely.
Oh no, not nearly. No. So I think it's more rampant here because again, we just wrap up so much identity in being black. And yeah, and like again, like there's so many like this. It's like you're dealing with different nationalities. It's like a cross cultural thing. Like like my background's Jamaican, and then like could be from Ghana. Like if you know what I mean. Like it's it's literally being somebody raised in the West versus somebody raised in the East. Like it's there, like there's going to be a lot of differences there. So it's like it's okay, we're both the same race, but I mean, there's everything else, like almost everything else is different in a situation like that. So I don't know. It's hard to make a correlation there when all you're focusing on is on race. So it's easy to see how there can be so many differences and why people from each opposing sex feel that way. So yeah.
No, that's true. No, all right, Matt, you have anything to add?
No, actually, no. This is something that I've never actually understood. I just don't understand why there's this vilification against their own demographic. I just don't get that. But it is a universal thing too, though. It really depends so much on the individuals and the groups that you find yourself in. I know you're looking at it from a macro perspective and seeing that this seems to be a rampant issue. But I see it with white groups and even Asian groups, gang affiliated Asians. It's out of control with everybody. So it really is dependent on who you're associating with. And I've seen in the summer, I helped a friend with he's friends with a large group of black friends. And I helped the one gentleman move into a new home. And you wouldn't think these are just great crew of guys, just phenomenal, good people. Everybody had a successful job, and it's like you wouldn't think anything of that with interacting with these guys. So it's so dependent on individual cases.
Absolutely. No, that's true. All right, we are starting to run a little long. We may have to do a part 2 for this. I think that would actually be pretty awesome. So just last touch point, how are we answering this question? Everybody give their opinion. Go. Is victim mentality damaging the Black community? Will, you can go first.
Yes. Throw victim mentality out of the window. I mean, and it goes beyond the Black community, man. It's if you want to keep it at, let's say, just keep it at man in general. There's no need to be a victim. You know what I mean? It's not our biological imperative to be so. You know what I mean? And I mean, again, I kind of touched on this earlier about the Black community being led by women, and you can kind of see that reading into how we carry ourselves with this emotional kind of victim state. So yeah, it's damaging. That mentality is damaging the community big time. Yeah.
All right, Darren.
No, definitely got to get rid of it for sure. It's there's, you know, I it's just we've come a long way to get where we are now. Obviously there's still a lot more areas we need to grow, and we need more leaders, both above and inside the community. So nothing's perfect, but the idea of that is it's outdated, and we need to not necessarily we don't need to find something else, but we need to start taking accountability and start you know start 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 building up our own shit and start actually doing what we are always talking about, instead of always being a conversation, waiting a long time for someone to kind of get somebody else to do something. No, just get out there and do it your damn self, even if it's on a smaller scale. Doesn't have to move the needle. Just do something, you know?
Matt.
Yeah, I'd say actually it's quite damaging, and it's damaging to anybody of any race, gender, political, religious affiliation, no matter what it is. It's a self-defeating, self-destructive mentality that will just end in total collapse of any person or group that adheres to it. So absolutely damaging, and it's a sad state of events, but it can be rectified with the right leadership, as we've discussed, and the right attitude. Attitude is key.
For myself, I definitely do believe it, and I understand where a lot of people come from. Yes, we went through it. We know this. Every history book has told us this. Every time February rolls around, they remind us of how far we've actually come as a community. But still, like, of us wake and actually looking at the world as it is and not as it was. We weren't given the right to vote. We weren't even viewed as people. And if we're dating this back to slavery, which is everybody wants to do, slavery is different. But now slavery hits everybody. If you want to consider it a job, everybody works. I think we are on the most level playing field we have been. Are we a little bit behind? Probably. But it's because our society hasn't caught up yet. Our society needs to take more initiative. We need to work harder. And the more we put away this idea of we've been victimized and we've been regulated by the government, by other societies, by everything, that's great. But that's not our reality now. There are more actual Black millionaires out there than there ever was. We've now had a Black president. So I think we are, as people, holding ourselves back. And I'm not really sure why. I think Black communities need to start stepping up, and they need to start saying, hey, listen, we may have been victims before, but we choose to not do it now. We need to do the work. Like Will said earlier, we need to do the work. We need to do the hard work. We need to stop. We need to start putting the excuses away, and we need to start following those people who are making progress. Now, everybody looks at like the big name people. Nothing has to be grand in society. Yeah, LeBron James is great. Cool. But your uncle has a full-time job and is taking care of his family, and he needs to be looked at as a pillar as well, because he's the closest representation you have. Unless you're asking dunk a ball, you can't look at yourself as LeBron. But that doesn't mean you can't be your uncle. That doesn't mean you can't be your dad who worked his ass off to put you through school and get you an education. We need to stop thinking so big and start taking those small steps, so this isn't as overwhelming progression wise as it is. They built the pyramid one brick at a time. We got to start repairing our community the exact same way. I don't know about you guys. Definitely want to do a part two. I want to thank you guys for coming out. You guys have been amazing. Any final thoughts or any final words from anyone?
Can't wait for part 2. I'm
All right.
ready.
Yeah.
Hey, all right. This was the crew from the Stone Disclosure, guys. We will be back. This episode is going to air on Thursday. Well, by the time it airs, it will be Thursday. So I guess that doesn't make a whole lot of sense at this point. But we will be discussing a part 2. I want you guys to leave your comments in the bottom. If there's anything you guys want to touch on, cool, let us know. We can talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. And we will see you guys in the next one. In the meantime, protect your heart.